So it's like we're seeing a modern echo of the 1930s tariff spiral, right? You know, reminiscent of the infamous Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act, which really reshaped global trade back then.
Yep, that's right. It's fascinating and a bit unsettling how history sort of repeats itself.
Absolutely. Back then, after the 1929 crash, there was this widespread belief that high tariffs would protect American jobs and industries, even though the effects were, disastrous.
I mean, can you imagine? Over 20,000 imported goods saw their tariffs, on average, shoot up to like 59%, which is just astronomical.
Yeah, exactly. And that move, while intended to shield domestic businesses, instead unleashed a chain reaction of retaliatory tariffs by trade partners like Canada and France. It's like a domino effect where suddenly global trade fell by more than 65% and unemployment skyrocketed.
Right. And on top of that, GDP dipped nearly 30%, which is just, whoa. Talk about severe consequences.
Now, fast forward to today, it's like we're seeing a similar pattern unfold. The tariffs from the Trump era, primarily aimed at seemingly revitalizing domestic manufacturing, have ended up creating a similar tension in global trade.
Yep. True, and it's not just about protecting American industries spoken in abstract. We saw concrete impacts too, like China hitting back with tariffs on American soybeans, automobiles, and even agriculture. That really hit U.S. farmers hard, huh?
Oh, for sure. The America First narrative seemed to promise domestic recovery, but the unintended fallout, like supply chain fractures and increased costs for imported parts, ended up hurting the broader economy.
And there's also the issue of, minimal economic gains. I've read studies suggesting that these measures actually cost more jobs than they saved, kind of like trying to fix a leaky boat by patching one hole and then discovering there are a ton of them.
Exactly. Plus, when you stack tariffs up, you're stacking up global retaliation. It's like playing an economic game of chicken, and nobody really wins. Trade partners just keep hitting back, which strains the World Trade Organization and eventually causes broader economic isolation.
But don't you think there's a bit of a political allure to these tariffs? I mean, protecting jobs looks and sounds good on paper, even if the real world results are less than stellar.
That's true, and it's a bit ironic. Politically, protectionism is a crowd pleaser, especially when people are feeling the effects of economic downturns. Yet, history teaches us that such strategies rarely deliver long-term benefits.
It's almost like a short-term fix that, in the long run, fractures the economy. And here's where I might challenge a point. Some argue that with today's technology and global supply chains, the impact of tariffs might not be as catastrophic as in the 1930s. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that's a fair question. Yes, modern economies are more diversified and interconnected, and sometimes technology cushions the blow, but tariffs still cause real pain. In both eras, they lead to higher consumer prices, hurt small businesses, and disrupt global supply lines.
And even if, say, automation or robotics are somewhat buffering the job losses in manufacturing, the overall impact on consumer prices and economic stability isn't exactly negligible.
Precisely. It's like trying to rebuild trust after a betrayal. The damage isn't just economic. It's also about undermining global trust. The 1930s tariffs contributed in part to social instability, and we certainly don't want to see a repeat of that today.
Right, exactly. And when you consider the possibility of becoming more isolated economically, it really hampers collaborative opportunities with allies.
Absolutely. Cooperation, as we saw post-World War II, actually paved the way for a robust global economic boom. There's this clear lesson. Collaboration is key rather than clinging on to isolationist measures like high tariffs.
And it's not just about economic metrics, right? There's also the impact on domestic consumers who end up shouldering increased costs due to those tariffs.
Right. Tariffs are a blunt instrument, a bit like using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. Sure, you might achieve something, but the collateral damage is huge. The increased costs, reduced supply chain efficiency, and potential job losses all compound to create a larger problem.
And then there's the political gamble of, well, reviving an old strategy that massively backfired before. It's almost like ignoring a history lesson that everyone else is trying to learn from.
Totally. The Smoot-Hawley scenario is a classic case where, in striving to safeguard the nation, policymakers inadvertently triggered a deep recession by igniting a round of retaliatory measures globally.
Yes. What's interesting is that both then and now, the rhetoric seems to be, we know what's best for our country, despite the overwhelming evidence that these measures, while politically appealing, lead to economic hardships.
Exactly. And it's a bit like putting a Band-Aid on a broken leg. Politicians talk tough, but ultimately the damage ripples across multiple sectors, from agriculture to manufacturing, and makes the economy more fragile.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting how global retaliation is almost a given. When one country sets up these barriers, you can almost predict the counter moves. It becomes a tit-for-tat scenario that leaves everyone worse off.
And that's the heart of the lesson. Protectionism might sound appealing in politically turbulent times, but history shows us it really sets off a chain of events that can lead to widespread, even prolonged economic harms.
Considering that perspective, one could also argue that modern tariffs might be a distraction from investing in more innovative and sustainable trade solutions. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, instead of resorting to tariffs as a knee-jerk response, investing in smarter trade agreements, fostering global alliances, and upskilling the workforce would probably yield better outcomes.
There's something almost paradoxical here. In trying to fix domestic issues by isolating the economy, these measures actually contribute to further isolation and challenges that no one wants in today's interconnected world.
Exactly. And it's a lesson that echoes both then and now. We need to move away from blunt instruments like tariffs and towards nuanced cooperative strategies. It's the difference between short-term political wins and long-lasting economic stability.
Right. And the irony is hard to ignore. What was once seen as a measure of protecting sovereignty now seems more like we're digging our own economic grave.
Indeed, it's like using outdated playbooks in a modern game. The stakes are too high and the global environment is too interconnected for these isolationist measures to work without severe repercussions.
So, considering all that, would you say that the key takeaway is to learn from history rather than repeating it?
Absolutely. The takeaway here is simple yet profound. History warns us that protectionism may provide a fleeting sense of security, but ultimately, it ends up isolating economies, raising consumer costs, and triggering global instability. Instead, thoughtful cooperation and modern trade policies are the way forward.
Well, it's been a riveting discussion. It's clear that while the lure of protectionism is strong during tough times, the long-term economic lessons from the past and the warnings of today should steer us toward more collaborative solutions.
Exactly. And if we can internalize that and channel our policy efforts into building robust global partnerships rather than erecting trade barriers, perhaps we can avoid repeating Hoover's mistakes.
Thanks for the deep dive into this topic. It's reassuring to know that history provides such clear lessons, even if they're sometimes hard to follow in the heat of political debate.
Absolutely. Learning from the past is crucial. It's like our roadmap for a more sustainable economic future. Thanks for the insightful dialogue.